All right, so hey folks, it is October the 30th, and we're discussing chapter 68, which mostly has to do with the Fourth Crusade, but it also briefly mentions the Children's Crusade, which is very tragic, and fifth, sixth, and seventh. Some say that there was 8 in total if you include the Children's Crusade, but it kind of depends on your perspective. When we come back Monday, we're going to talk about the conclusion chapter over 69. Move on from there. I believe the next section is going to have a lot to do with the Black Death, the Crusades, plus the Black Death, plus the fall of Constantinople is going to create the background that's going to create the Renaissance. All right, so the terms, once again, Fourth Crusade, Children's Crusade, Fifth, Sixth, and Seventh Crusades. And so the things I have for today as far as our images. So this is not from a child's notebook. This is actually from a manuscript depicting Innocent III. And he is the Pope who's going to call for the Fourth Crusade, which is essentially they're trying a new tactic out. Instead of invading from where the Arabs and the Turks were expecting, invading Jerusalem or invading north through the Crusader states where they had good defenses, they decided to go around the south through North Africa into Egypt and work their way up from there. Like the book said, Crusaders, many of the kingdoms had a lot of problems. Some of them were fighting each other in Europe, kind of like feudal lords usually do. And it was very expensive to go crusading, and they didn't want to have to put up with this expense again. However, due to the call of chivalry and also piety and things like that, at least at first, many young knights wanted to still join a crusade. They saw this as a chance for glory, of course. And when they go off, they figure if they're going to go to Egypt, they have to sail across the Mediterranean. We're going to talk about Italy a lot more in the future when we talk about the Renaissance. But the city of Venice was essentially one of the richest cities in the world at this time, but it was also had a very powerful navy. They knew a lot about the Mediterranean. They had very good boats called galleys, and they were able to ship crusaders in the past where they needed to go. So when the Crusaders make it to Venice and they ask for passage, the Venetians said that they will sail them across. But first, they have to go attack one of their rivals. Unfortunately, it was another Christian city. They take this city and they give it to the Venetians. But then the Venetians ask them, of course, to attack Constantinople, who, if you remember, before the First Crusade, asked Western Europe to help them out in the first place, where the Crusaders already had a taste for wealth, and so they did it. And they actually captured the city. This was something that the strongest Arabic and Turkish armies weren't able to do in the past. Neither were the Persians, neither were Vikings, neither were barbaric invaders from Eastern Europe. And when the Crusaders take over it, the Pope Innocent III is going to get super mad about this. And so he's going to have them excommunicated. Problem is, when he excommunicates them, that kind of eggs them on to do more of this. And for about the next 50 or so years, they're going to divide up the lands of Constantinople into little fiefdoms. And from there, they're going to act essentially as a pirate kingdom. And so now that they're a band of warriors who believe that they're going to hell anyways, they decide to just go with it and start slaughtering as many people they can and robbing from as many people as they can throughout the Mediterranean. So we see the Crusades has definitely kind of backfired on it. Of course, eventually you're going to have the rightful heir of the Byzantine throne come back, take the city back. But there's been so much destruction and so much loss of wealth that's going to be taken from there that the city's never fully going to recover again. And it's going to make it very weak to where when the Ottomans come in later, especially with the help of cannons, it's going to fall very easily. So see how the Crusaders turn into bad guys. Some historians blame that this was a problem of having a bunch of young men with no strong leader. But in any case, it goes to show that many of the Crusaders weren't there for pious reasons. Many of them were there just kind of for glory and loot, as a result of the Fourth Crusade. So that's going to end up being a disaster. Later on, starting out in France, you're going to have another religious revival calling for a popular crusade. Remember, we had a people's crusade, the crusade of the poor in the First Crusade. And many of the peasants who went off to do this, most of them unarmed families, wound up perishing within the crusades. They didn't follow the real army. Well, this fever happened again, but this time people were calling for a children's crusade. We're not exactly sure how this started. We're not really sure how this took off and who spread the word. But thousands of children wound up leaving their homes, banding together throughout France. They walked across the Swiss Alps, kind of like Hannibal, all the way to Italy. When they made it to the coast of Italy, they begged for ships to carry them to the Holy Land. Unfortunately, most of the ships that took them to there were actually slave ships, because slavery was still a really big deal in the Middle East. So many of the children who did not starve or die in the wilderness were actually sold as slaves to the Turks. So it's a very sad point in history there too. So, well, like I said, this was a time of a lot of superstition, a lot of people just really having no hope in the world that they're in. So the Fourth Crusade is going to be led largely by the German king, Frederick. I forgot which Frederick. He's going to be very successful initially within his conquest into the Holy Land. And for a very short amount of time, they're going to take Jerusalem back for Christendom. But this is going to be short-lived because they're not going to be able to consolidate. I mean, they're small medieval kingdoms on the other side of a large body of water, and it was going to be very hard for them to hold land like this. Oh, that's for tomorrow. So, and the Sixth and the Seventh Crusade is essentially going to be defensive crusades to try to protect those crusader kingdoms that we talked about earlier, like in Syria and Antioch and stuff like that, but they're going to be driven back. The only areas that are going to be left to be held by crusaders are going to be held by the Templars and the Hospitallars, essentially on large Greek islands, such as, I think, like Sicily and Cyprus, wasn't it? And they're going to be there for quite some time until the Ottomans are going to take them back later. Yeah, Cyprus and Rhodes. And so even today, they still have crusader castles on them and stuff like that left over. So, any questions? All right, cool. Yeah. All right, Fourth Crusade. So the Fourth Crusade had a bit of a start. So what exactly happened in the Fourth Crusade? All right, tell you what, here's what we're going to do. I've got three things. 1, 2, 3. I have 3 rows. 1, 2, 3. All right, I'm going to give y'all a few minutes. You can discuss with one another, but you're going to answer this by row. So y'all are going to do Fourth Crusade. Y'all are going to do Children's Crusade. And y'all are going to do 5, 6, and 7th Crusade at the very end of the chapter. That's actually the easiest one. So I'm going to start my timer, give you 3 minutes, 1 minute per row, and then we shall begin. So I hope y'all paid attention.
Was it like crazy?
So what do you mean by
But then it got recaptured again.
No one answered except French knights. Is that right? And then they went to Venice to get ship. And then Oh, we'll give you shit if you take the city. Okay, that's it. I'm telling you, what you say. They attack everything and then they come back and it's like there, it's just that now it's protection. Like when they attack it, they take over. Whatever process and then they're back to, oh, you can fix the, oh, man. If it did,
Innocent Third calls for crusade. All the French knights want glory. They're like, what can we do? And they're like, what is it that said we can't do it, but you have to push back the,
they went
I
back
can't
and-
even tell, look at it and they actually.
Those
That's
are
just
people
people
that
there.
I don't like that.
She said to Egypt.
Still kept.
And then they're like, before that, in order for you to say it, it's like,
Let's take Noble.
no, the other thing. Community of Star. They take the city and get back to like there. Like, okay, but wait, before you do leadership, get with that, our friends that all take it over. Do they do that?
They don't tell me how. So,
But,
This is a very
you know,
bad thing.
what's your rate?
let's read it.
She only read the children's crusade.
I know, but it was the first one.
So how did you?
Yeah, I know they had teenage male.
Was that reading the first one?
That was her at a newspaper company.
Alright, so what did you read?
Same thing.
No, really?
And they went on one specific
You ever read
trip.
his ad? What's that? Pretty much, what was the pretty much? So you're seeing.
3 seconds. And there we have it. All right, kids. So let's go ahead and let's get the first one because it makes sense to go with the
No, we can
first, right?
start off the order.
Nah.
We did it last time.
That I did.
We did it
That I
last time.
did.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. So, folks, what was the Fourth Crusade about?
Me?
So you can start, yeah. Start it off.
Okay, I gotta remember what I was gonna say.
Okay.
Basically, Innocent III wanted to start another crusade, and all the French people, all the French little knights, were like, "We want glory, we'll do it." And then they
Yeah,
and then they
so,
went to Venice,
Uh-huh.
and they asked them like, "Hey, like we want to go to Egypt,
let me get some ships, yeah.
and they were like, well, we'll give you the ships, but you got to do some stuff for us."
Uh-huh.
So they ended up having to attack Zara, I think.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
the city is right, yeah.
Mhm.
But she is a Christian city. So like,
Uh-huh.
and then, they get back, we did it. And they're like, no, now you have to take over Constantinople. And then they do that, but then at that point, they get back to the Pope and he's like, no, you did bad. You did the wrong thing. And so they got excommunicated.
Yeah. Yeah, so your book wrongly says that he threatened it. No, he actually did to all the knights. And they were just like, well, forget it then. We're going to be pirates. And so instead of being saintly crusaders, they turned out to be hellish pirates. So didn't work out that well. So yeah, they took Constantinople. My gosh, Constantinople and established pirate kingdoms. And yes, they were feudal in nature, but they built themselves up a navy and went to pillaging. So that backfired. I guess you got to be careful when you ask a whole bunch of young armed guys to go do you a favor. Maybe it doesn't turn out well. Oh well. Well, remember this something similar happened in England. They invited the Saxons over to help fight their enemies, and then the Saxons decided to take over England. So these bad things can happen. Bad things can happen. Careful who you let in your house. All right. So the Children's Crusade. Ooh, sad stuff. Weeping and wailing tonight. So
And so, like, they wanted to go, go to the Holy Land, I guess.
yeah, thousands of children.
And so they went on a crusade, and the majority of them either died or sold into slavery, but they never got to the Holy Land.
Yeah.
And the Pope who was there, Pope Innocent III was like,
Look how great they are, right?
these children put us to shame with their crusading methods.
Yeah, it's like, well, hey, they're living the dream, right? So he was saying they're very pious. So like popes in the past, there had already been a president now. Like we said in the past, like the popes have become more and more secular. Instead of being church leaders, they started becoming more and more involved in things like warfare and stuff. And that's going to even go further into the extremes when we start talking about the Renaissance. So they go from the old days of being bishops and stuff like that, like back when you had old Peter, Jesus, Apostle Peter, go to Rome. And then eventually they're going to become these powerful guys who are going to talk to other kingdoms across the ocean and call for war. So it's going to be a very big change in how that all worked out. They're going to march to Italy on a crusade. I'll just end to abbreviate what you said, thankfully. Most died or sold into slavery. Very sad. Very sad. So, goes to show the crusading spirit was not always such a positive thing. So, moving on to the 4th, 5th, and 6th Crusades. So, this can be a super abbreviation here, y'all. So
the first or the 5th crusade was about the Emperor Frederick II recovered Jerusalem in 1229 AD.
yeah, so Frederick II.
But he didn't take it by fighting, he took it by treaty.
Yeah, took back. Now there was fighting. He defeated the Turks well enough of where they signed a treaty for this. Took back Jerusalem for a little while.
Yeah, and then the Muslims came around.
Mm-hmm. And after this, you're essentially going to have Muslims in charge of Jerusalem all the way until the formation of modern Israel. Way later, after World War II. So.
The 6th and the 7th were about was when the end of the 13th century was coming to an end, and the Christian post in Syria fell in 1291, and then the Latin kingdom of Jerusalem ceased to exist.
Yeah. So I'm going to have defensive crusades attempting to keep Crusader kingdoms founded in the First Crusade I'm going to say all was lost except for Rhodes and Cyprus. It will, of course, later be taken over by the Ottomans later on. And so will Greece, much of Eastern Europe, Armenia. In fact, the Ottomans are going to push so far, they're actually going to make it almost to Germany from the east side, all the way up to Austria. We'll talk about that a bit more later. So this is going to be the end of the advancement of Europe. And eventually you're going to have where the Ottomans later on, when the Ottoman Empire is going to do a counter crusade, you could almost call it like a Muslim crusade, and they're going to make it all the way and almost take Europe. So going to get close for them too. All right, so very good, very good. Yeah, when we come back, we're going to talk about some of the aftermath and the benefits that this is going to have on Europe. Because the thing is about big things like this, they can be tragic, but people can learn from it. It's the same with the bubonic plague. It's going to be tragic, but there's some historians say that there's actually some things that benefited the survivors that happened because of the demographics change. Change. And that's going to end it for today. Talk to you later, kids. Let me end this.
What could Craig's do?